Former US banking regulator becoming the head of one of the world's largest crypto exchanges. Brian Brooks is former acting comptroller of the currency, set to become the CEO of Binance US. He was also chief legal officer at Coinbase, and he joins us now. Brian, fantastic to have you on the show. Congratulations, firstly, on the move. You, I think, can be credited with bringing the Office of the Comptroller into the 21st century in terms of what payments and the financial system can look like in the United States. How does that focus fit with becoming the CEO of Binance US?
Well, look, Julia, first of all, thanks so much for having me. And I think your comment about Dogecoin just shows we're at a place in this market where it's a $2 trillion market that needs some channeling, right? It needs some directionality. And that's what we tried to do in my last role running the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, is to demonstrate to people that these are not Cabbage Patch Kids. These are not collectibles. These are tokens powering fundamental financial networks. And that's why the cryptocurrency market has gone from $0 to $2 trillion in only 11 years. What I hope to do at Binance is use that platform to bring those technologies to the market in a way that's safe, easy, inexpensive, and accessible to more Americans and ultimately more people in the world.
We're going to talk more about that, but firstly, you mentioned Dogecoin again, so now I have to. Do you include Dogecoin in that? Not a Cabbage Patch Kid?
Here's the funny thing when you have a market. So think about the stock market. There are all kinds of stocks out there for companies that are ultimately not going to be useful and are not going to succeed. And many of those companies go to bankruptcy. Now, I'm not saying Dogecoin will do that. Dogecoin seems to be a novelty item, kind of like Cabbage Patch Kids were in the 80s, as I say. But Dogecoin is not a token that is powering a fundamental network the way that Ethereum is, or Solana is, or Filecoin is. I mean, there are things out there that really are changing the world. And the point about exchanges is to bring all of those before the market so that investors and customers can assess which ones are most useful. That's why stocks have value, and ultimately that's why crypto tokens have value.
Diplomatic. But is it about an exchange being an on-ramp for a broader understanding? Because you and I not only talked about cryptocurrencies as an entry point into this space and this technology, it's the underlying networks that provide, I think, what's most exciting about the potential.
Yeah, I think you've got it exactly right, Julia. I think about exchanges as on-ramps that ultimately won't be necessary in their current form 5 years from now. If you think about fax machines or scanners, they were a funny sort of intermediate technology where, to use a document on the internet, you had to first print out a piece of paper and sign it and then get it onto the internet using your scanner. But nobody does that anymore, right? Now we have DocuSign and fully internet native tools to allow us to never leave the internet. And I think ultimately that's the way crypto finance will work as well, is at a certain point, finance will have migrated out of the analog age and into the digital age, at which point the idea of moving your fiat currency into your crypto wallet won't really have meaning anymore. At that point, we'll be fully network native, just as we are on the internet for everything else.
So you saying in 5 years' time, Coinbase, Binance US will be unnecessary?
No, I guess what I'm saying is at that point, these companies will be radically transformed into platform companies that are providing services for the crypto economy, like Google went beyond search at one point.
And that makes sense to me. I think one of the other things, and again, you and I have discussed it, and we've touched on this a little bit on the show, is the idea of decentralized finance, this idea of cutting out the middleman in things that require some form of contract, whether it's insurance, whether it's lending. Is that another avenue that you see as potential for Binance US going forward?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, we've learned a lot in the last year about not just the costs of middlemen, but also the dangers of middlemen. So we know what the costs are, right? We all know how expensive it is to go to the bank and experience an overdraft fee or a late fee or a low balance fee in our account, right? That's the cost of them performing their middleman function. But we've also seen how dangerous it can be. Think about the sort of social issues of people being deplatformed from various social media accounts because some central, overseer decided that their opinions were the wrong opinions or whatever. When that comes to finance, which is what is very possible in a world where you have bank CEOs deciding who gets an account or which services get to be provided, that gets a little bit scary in a free society. The point of decentralization is to say, let's take that out and let's just all be free, right? Let's just all have access to our money and to all the transactions that we want to do as free people. That's a fairly fundamental ideology that powers a lot of crypto, and it's what decentralization is about. It's about freedom.
Yeah, these are the things we have to be talking about, I think, when we're trying to educate people about the crypto space. It's not just about the rise and fall of digital tokens or cryptocurrencies, as we call it. Coinbase. I mention it again because it is a competitor, and one of the statistics that came out from that when it IPO'd was that they're making 75% of the revenues of the Nasdaq on 2% of the volumes, and that's hugely alluring for people to come into this space and compete and fight for those margins, quite frankly, Brian. But is part of what we've just discussed here sort of an evolution of what these exchanges represent? Focusing too much on the loss of those margins is irrelevant as the products that these exchanges offer diversifies.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, at some point, as you saw with Robinhood and Charles Schwab, you can't actually have a business model, certainly not a decentralized business model, that's focused on harvesting exchange fees from people, for the privilege of spending money. That won't last. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of value-add services that need to be brought. And I'll just tell you about Coinbase. Coke is a better product because of Pepsi. That's kind of my thesis for Binance US. Coinbase will be a better company because it will have fierce competition from us, and that's good for everybody.
Because you'll fight and innovate.
Exactly.
Talk to me about regulation, because this is the big question mark that remains. And I know you are one of those at the forefront of fighting for clarity for the better of the industry. How do we find a balance between addressing some of the concerns over lack of transparency, of it being misused, versus suppressing innovation that puts the United States at a disadvantage relative to other countries like China, for example, that are pushing this and moving forward in leaps and bounds?
Yeah, well, Julia, I would say a couple of quick things about that. First of all, now that we're at a $2 trillion market cap in crypto, I think the fear that regulation will somehow banish or suppress this, that's gone away, where it's too late for that. Too many people are here. There's too much value here. So that's the good news, as we've crossed that Rubicon. The other thing I would say is during my time at the OCC, we did some things that are fairly permanent, right? We chartered crypto banks, for example, and those charters can never be taken away. So this is now embedded in the system in a permanent way. Now what we need to start thinking about is what should the content of these regulations be? And, in the same way that we don't apply FCC broadcast licenses to YouTube, even though YouTube is a way of distributing video content all around the world, we need to start getting the idea that some of these banking regulations, they don't exist for the sake of existing. They exist because banking presents certain risks that don't exist in crypto land. So there's no risk that there's a middleman committing fraud or that there's some bad credit decision being made in crypto because there's no person making a decision. We can put those to one side. What we need to focus on are things like money laundering and terrorism financing, which are real risks in crypto as they are elsewhere, and find blockchain native solutions to those things that allow people the benefits while suppressing the costs. We need to focus on both the benefit side and the cost side if we want to have another internet revolution like we did in the 90s. And I think that's where we'll get to.